Odysseus faced storms, giants, and monsters on his journey home. Yet one of the most dangerous places he reached offered no violence at all. The island of the Lotus-Eaters promised food, peace, and relief from every painful memory. But after tasting the lotus, his men no longer wanted to return to their families or even remember who they were. What kind of power could make a person abandon home, identity, and purpose without a single chain or weapon? Welcome to Gods and Heroes Unveiled, where ancient myths reveal their darkest secrets. Arrival on the island. The journey to the island began in disaster. After leaving the land of the Cyclones, Odysseus and his remaining ships were struck by a violent northern wind sent across the sea by Zeus. Dark clouds covered the sky, powerful waves battered the wooden hulls, and the fleet was driven far away from its intended route. For 9 days, the ships were carried across unfamiliar waters. On the 10th day, the exhausted Greeks finally saw land. The island appeared peaceful and fertile. There were no towering walls, armed soldiers, roaring monsters, or signs of an approaching storm. After days of hunger, fear, and uncertainty, it seemed like a place where the men could rest and recover. Odysseus ordered his crew to go ashore, collect fresh water, and prepare food beside the ships. But before allowing the entire company to explore, he chose 3 men to investigate the island: 2 trusted scouts and a herald. Their task was simple. They were to discover who lived there, learn whether the inhabitants were friendly, and return with information. The men followed the coastline inland, expecting either danger or hospitality. Instead, they encountered a people Homer calls the Lotus-Eaters. These islanders showed no hostility. They carried no weapons and made no attempt to capture the strangers. They simply offered them something to eat. It was a small act of apparent kindness. Yet the moment the Greek sailors tasted the lotus, the purpose of their entire journey began to disappear. The men who ate the lotus. The Lotus-Eaters welcomed the 3 Greek visitors without violence or suspicion. They did not demand payment, question their purpose, or threaten them with imprisonment. Instead, they offered the strangers the fruit of the lotus plant. To men who had endured war, shipwreck, hunger, and 9 days of violent winds, the gift may have seemed harmless. Almost immediately, something within them changed. Homer does not say that they collapsed, became unconscious, or forgot every detail of their past. They still understood where they were and recognized the men around them. But they lost the desire to continue their journey. They no longer wished to return to the ships. They no longer wanted to carry news back to Odysseus. Most importantly, they no longer cared about reaching Ithaca. Home had not vanished from their memory completely. It had simply stopped mattering. The men wanted only to remain among the Lotus-Eaters, continue eating the strange plant, and live without thinking about the difficult voyage ahead. That was what made the lotus so dangerous. It did not control them through pain. It did not place them under guard or force them to obey. Instead, it removed the reason they would ever want to leave. The island offered rest without responsibility, pleasure without struggle, and peace without the burden of memory. For exhausted men who had already survived 10 years of war, such an offer may have felt less like a trap and more like mercy. But when the scouts failed to return, Odysseus understood that something was wrong. He had sent 3 men to investigate the island. Now, he would have to rescue them from a danger they no longer believed was dangerous. Odysseus forces them to leave. Odysseus went inland with several members of the crew and soon found the missing scouts among the Lotus-Eaters. The men were alive, unharmed, and apparently content. They were not prisoners. No guards surrounded them, and no chains held them in place. They simply refused to return. When Odysseus ordered them back to the ships, they resisted. They wept, protested, and begged to remain on the island where they could continue eating the lotus. Reasoning with them was impossible. The plant had not erased their ability to speak or recognize their commander. It had erased the desire that once guided them, the desire to return home. Odysseus therefore used force. He seized the men, dragged them back toward the shore, and carried them aboard despite their resistance. Once on the ships, he tied them beneath the rowing benches so they could not escape and return to the island. Then he gave an immediate order to the rest of the crew. Everyone was to board the ships at once. No one else would be allowed to explore the island or taste its food. The sailors took their places at the oars, and the fleet left the shore before the Lotus could claim anyone else. Odysseus had rescued his men, but not from an enemy they feared. He had rescued them from a happiness they desperately wanted to keep. What was Homer's lotus? For centuries, readers have tried to identify the mysterious plant that caused Odysseus' men to abandon their journey. But the word lotus did not always describe the flower we recognize today. Ancient writers used the name for several different plants, making any identification uncertain. One proposed candidate is a thorny shrub that grows in North Africa and produces a small, sweet fruit similar to a jujube. Other theories suggest a date like fruit, a type of clover, or a water plant associated with Egypt. Some of these plants could provide food or produce a mildly relaxing effect. Yet none has been proven capable of making people forget their families and surrender every desire to return home. The location of the island is equally uncertain. Ancient traditions connected the Lotus-Eaters with the coast of North Africa, while later writers attempted to identify the island with places such as Jerba, near modern Tunisia. But Homer does not provide enough geographical detail to confirm any specific location. It is also possible that the lotus was never intended to represent one real plant. Homer may have created or exaggerated its effects to serve the story. The plant does not erase every memory like a magical spell. Instead, it removes motivation. Those who eat it can still speak, recognize others, and understand what is happening. They simply stop caring about the life they once wanted to return to. That distinction matters. The true power of the lotus is not forgetfulness in the ordinary sense. It is the loss of purpose. Whether inspired by a real fruit, a calming substance, or pure imagination, Homer's lotus represents something more dangerous than sleep. It offers relief from suffering by making the sufferer forget why anything beyond the present moment should matter. The temptation to forget. The sailor's reaction becomes easier to understand when we remember what they had already endured. They had spent 10 years fighting at Troy. They had watched friends die, cities burn, and families disappear into slavery. Even after the war ended, the journey home brought no peace. Storms drove them off course. Hunger followed them across the sea. Every unfamiliar coastline threatened another battle, shipwreck, or death. The lotus offered an escape from all of it. It did not promise victory, wealth, or glory. It offered something simpler, the chance to stop caring. For men carrying years of fear and grief, forgetting may have felt like freedom. This is why the island represents more than physical pleasure. It represents avoidance. The sailors no longer had to confront the memories of Troy. They did not have to face the dangerous voyage ahead. They did not have to wonder whether their families were still alive or whether Ithaca would recognize the men they had become. By remaining among the Lotus-Eaters, they could live entirely in the present. There would be no painful past and no uncertain future. But that peace came at a terrible cost. Without memory, home loses its meaning. Without responsibility, purpose disappears. Without the desire to move forward, comfort becomes a prison that no longer feels like one. The sailors believed they had found happiness, yet that happiness required them to abandon everything that had once defined them. Their families, promises, identities, and years of sacrifice became unimportant. The lotus did not simply remove pain. It removed the part of them that believed anything was worth enduring pain for. That makes the episode deeply human. Most people will never encounter a magical plant that erases the desire to return home. But the temptation to avoid grief, responsibility, and difficult goals remains familiar. The island asks an uncomfortable question. If you could escape every painful memory, but only by forgetting the people and purposes that gave your life meaning, would that truly be freedom? Why the Lotus-Eaters were so dangerous? The Lotus-Eaters were not the most violent danger Odysseus encountered, but they may have been among the most difficult to defeat. The Cyclops could crush a man with his hands. The Laestrygonians could destroy an entire fleet. Circe could transform sailors into animals. Each threat was terrifying, but each could be recognized as an enemy. The Lotus was different. It created no obvious wound. It raised no weapon and built no prison. Those who ate it did not feel attacked. They felt relieved. That made rescue almost impossible. A prisoner usually wants freedom. Odysseus' men wanted to remain exactly where they were. They resisted the person trying to save them and preferred the source of their captivity. Odysseus escaped this danger because he never tasted the lotus. He still remembered Ithaca, his wife Penelope, his son Telemachus, and the life waiting beyond the sea. Memory protected him. Throughout the Odyssey, returning home requires more than surviving monsters and storms. Odysseus must continue remembering who he is, where he belongs, and why the journey matters. The Lotus attacks that identity directly. If a sailor forgets home, there is no reason to endure the voyage. If he forgets his promises, there is no reason to resist comfort. If he loses his purpose, the island does not need to stop him from leaving. He will choose not to leave. That is why the Lotus-Eaters are so dangerous. They do not destroy the body. They make the soul surrender without realizing it has lost anything. Conclusion. The Lotus-Eaters never needed walls, weapons, or chains. Their island offered something far more powerful: a life without pain, responsibility, or the desire to return home. But that peace required Odysseus' men to surrender their memories, their families, and the purpose that had carried them across the sea. The greatest danger was not that the Lotus would kill them. It was that it would make them forget they had ever wanted to leave. Would you escape the island, or choose to stay and forget? Thank you for watching, and have a wonderful day.